The last day of school is supposed to be filled with laughter, tearful goodbyes, and the promise of summer. Instead, I found myself staring at a piece of paper that made my blood run cold. I remember the excitement in the air as I walked into school that morning. Seniors were hugging in the hallways. Teachers were smiling more than usual, and even the usually stoic Principal Harrison had a spring in his step. My best friend, Zoe, ran up to me, her curly hair bouncing with each step. "Can you believe it, Ethan? We're finally done," she squealed, throwing her arms around me. I laughed, returning her hug. I know. It's surreal. No more pop quizzes, no more mystery meat in the cafeteria. We made our way to our lockers, dodging groups of students taking selfies and signing yearbooks. I spun the combination lock. The familiar click's a bittersweet reminder that this would be the last time I'd open it. As I swung the door open, a folded piece of paper fluttered to the ground. I bent to pick it up, assuming it was a note from Zoe or another friend. But as I unfolded it, the words made my heart skip a beat. "The graduation ceremony will be your last. Blood will flow where tears should. This is not a joke." The handwriting was jagged and harsh, pressed so hard into the paper that it left indentations on the back. I read it again, hoping I had misunderstood, but the meaning was clear. "What's that?" Zoe asked, peering over my shoulder. I quickly folded the note and shoved it in my pocket. "Nothing." I lied, forcing a smile. "Just an old assignment." Zoe raised an eyebrow but didn't push it. As we walked to class, my mind raced. It had to be a prank, right? Some sick joke from a student who took things too far. But the weight of the paper in my pocket felt like a ticking time bomb. Throughout the day, I couldn't focus on anything. While my classmates were signing yearbooks and making summer plans, I was scanning faces, looking for anyone acting suspicious. Every laugh seemed forced, every smile hiding potential malice. During lunch, I couldn't eat. The cafeteria was too loud, too chaotic. I excused myself and headed to the bathroom, locking myself in a stall. With shaking hands, I pulled out the note and read it again. The words seemed to jump off the page, taunting me. I had to tell someone, but who would believe me? It was the last day of school. Everyone was in high spirits. They'd think I was trying to cause drama or seeking attention. And if it turned out to be nothing, I'd be the boy who cried wolf. As I exited the bathroom, I nearly collided with Mr. Ramirez, my English teacher. "Whoa there, Ethan," he said, steadying me. "Everything okay? You look a little pale." I opened my mouth, ready to spill everything, but the words caught in my throat. "I'm fine." I managed. Just emotional about graduating, I guess. Mr. Ramirez smiled kindly. "It's a big step, but you're ready for it. You've got a bright future ahead." If only he knew the dread I felt about the immediate future. The rest of the day passed in a blur. As the final bell rang, signaling the end of our high school careers, I felt no relief. While my classmates cheered and hugged, I stood frozen, the note burning a hole in my pocket. "Earth to Ethan," Zoe waved her hand in front of my face. "Come on, we're going to be late for graduation practice." I followed her to the auditorium, my feet feeling like lead. As we took our seats, Principal Harrison stepped onto the stage, beaming at us. "Congratulations, class of 2024. You've made it." The room erupted in cheers, but I couldn't join in. My eyes darted around, looking for anything out of place. A backpack left unattended, a stranger lurking in the wings, anything that could validate my fears. As Principal Harrison went through the logistics for tomorrow's ceremony, I tuned out, lost in my own thoughts. Should I tell him? The police? My parents? What if I was overreacting and ruined graduation for everyone? Ethan Carter? I snapped back to reality, realizing my name had been called. "Yes, you'll be seated here between Zoe Brennan and Alex Chun," the vice principal said, pointing to a chair. I nodded, trying to ignore the concerned look Zoe was giving me. As we practiced walking across the stage to receive our diplomas, my mind raced with worst-case scenarios. What if someone opened fire during the ceremony? What if there was a bomb? The thought of my family and friends in danger made me feel sick. After practice, as everyone headed out to celebrate, I hung back. I approached Principal Harrison, my heart pounding. "Mr. Harrison, can I talk to you for a minute?" He turned, his smile fading as he saw my expression. "Of course, Ethan. What's on your mind?" I pulled out the note with trembling hands and handed it to him. "I found this in my locker this morning." As he read it, his brow furrowed. He looked up at me, his eyes serious. "Have you shown this to anyone else?" I shook my head. I didn't know what to do. I thought maybe it was just a prank, but... "You did the right thing by coming to me," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I'll contact the police immediately. We'll increase security for tomorrow's ceremony." Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. What if it's not enough? What if someone gets hurt? "Mr. Harrison's face softened. "Ethan, I promise you, we will do everything in our power to keep everyone safe. But I need you to keep this to yourself for now. We don't want to cause a panic." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. As I left the school, the warm June air hit me, but I felt cold inside. The excitement of graduation had been replaced by a gnawing fear. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that note, the jagged handwriting spelling out threats against the people I cared about. When my alarm went off, I was already awake, staring at the ceiling. As I put on my graduation gown, I couldn't help but think about how it was the same deep blue as a police uniform. Would we need that protection today? I smoothed out the gown, feeling the weight of my phone in the pocket. Principal Harrison had given me his personal number, telling me to call immediately if I saw anything suspicious. The drive to school was tense. My parents chatted excitedly in the front seat, oblivious to the turmoil inside me. As we pulled into the parking lot, I saw several police cars and officers standing at the entrances. "That's a lot of security," my mom remarked. "I guess they're not taking any chances with such a big event." If only she knew. As we entered the school, I was hyper-aware of everything around me. Every face was a potential threat, every backpack a possible weapon. I said goodbye to my parents and made my way to where the graduates were gathering, my eyes constantly scanning the crowd. "There you are." Zoe appeared beside me, adjusting her cap. "Can you believe this is really happening? We're graduating." I forced a smile. "Yeah, it's crazy." She frowned, studying my face. "Ethan, what's going on? You've been acting weird since yesterday." I opened my mouth, wanting to tell her everything, but Principal Harrison's words echoed in my mind. "It's nothing," I lied. "Just nervous, I guess." Before she could press further, we were ushered into line. As we marched into the auditorium to pomp and circumstance, I felt like I was walking into battle rather than a celebration. The ceremony began, but I couldn't focus on the speeches. Every cough made me jump. Every sudden movement caught my eye. As names were called and students walked across the stage, I found myself counting down, dreading my turn. Ethan Carter. I stood on shaky legs, making my way to the stage. As I climbed the steps, I scanned the audience, looking for any sign of a threat. But all I saw were proud parents and bored siblings. I shook Principal Harrison's hand, acutely aware of the sweat on my palm. As he handed me my diploma, he gave me a subtle nod. Was it reassurance? A signal? My mind raced as I walked back to my seat. As the ceremony continued, I began to relax slightly. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe it really was just a cruel prank. And then I heard it. A loud pop from the back of the auditorium. My heart stopped. This was it. The threat was real. But then I heard laughter. I turned to see a red-faced parent fumbling with a champagne bottle. He'd opened it prematurely, the cork flying across the room. The ceremony concluded without incident. As we threw our caps in the air, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. We were safe. It was over. As the auditorium emptied, Principal Harrison pulled me aside. "The police did a thorough investigation," he said quietly. "They believe the note was indeed a prank. They're still looking into it, but it seems there was never any real threat." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. "Thank you for taking it seriously." He squeezed my shoulder. "Always better to be safe than sorry. Now go celebrate. You've earned it." As I joined my family and friends outside, the warm sun on my face felt like a new beginning. The fear that had gripped me for the past day began to fade, replaced by the excitement of the future ahead. But as I hugged Zoe and posed for pictures, a small part of me remained vigilant, because I had learned that sometimes the most terrifying threats are the ones that never materialize, leaving you forever wondering, what if? The empty desk at the front of the room screamed louder than any voice could. Mrs. Holloway was always early, always prepared. But today, on the last day of school, her absence felt like a void sucking the air out of the classroom. I slid into my usual seat, my eyes fixed on the barren teacher's desk. No steaming mug of coffee, no stack of carefully graded papers, no cheerful good morning to greet us. Something was very, very wrong. "Hey, Alex, where's the hollow monster?" Jake whispered from behind me, using our not-so-affectionate nickname for our strict English teacher. I shrugged, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. No idea. Maybe she's just running late. But Mrs. Holloway was never late. In 4 years of high school, I'd never seen her arrive after the bell. She was as predictable as the sunrise, and just as unavoidable when it came to turning in assignments. The minutes ticked by, the class growing restless. Whispers turned to chatter, then to full-blown conversations. Just as I was about to suggest someone go to the office, Mr. Grayson, the vice principal, walked in. The room fell silent. Mr. Grayson's face was grave, his usual jovial demeanor nowhere to be seen. "Class, I'm afraid Mrs. Holloway won't be joining us today, or for the foreseeable future." A collective gasp rippled through the room. My heart raced. What did he mean by foreseeable future? Is she okay? Melissa, always the compassionate one, asked from the front row. Mr. Grayson hesitated, his eyes darting around the room. "We're not sure. Mrs. Holloway didn't show up for work this morning, and she's not answering her phone. The police have been notified, and they're investigating." The police? My mind reeled. This wasn't just a sick day or a family emergency. This was serious. "Now, I know this is concerning, Mr. Grayson continued, but let's try to focus on finishing out the school year. Mrs. Chun will be covering your class today. If anyone has any information that might be helpful, please come see me in my office." As Mrs. Chun walked in, looking flustered and unprepared, I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened. Mrs. Holloway might have been strict, but she cared about her students. She wouldn't just disappear without a word, especially not on the last day of school. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Every classroom buzzed with theories about Mrs. Holloway's disappearance. By lunch, the rumors had grown wild and varied. I heard she ran off with the gym teacher. One freshman whispered as I passed their table. "No way," his friend argued. "My sister said she's in the witness protection program. That's why she left so suddenly." I rolled my eyes, setting my tray down at my usual table. My friends Zoe and Ethan were already deep in conversation. "It's got to be foul play," Ethan was saying, his voice low. "Think about it. Mrs. Holloway is the most predictable person on the planet. There's no way she'd just vanish without telling anyone." Zoe nodded, her dark curls bouncing. "I overheard Mr. Grayson talking to the school resource officer. They mentioned something about her car still being in her driveway." My stomach churned. "Guys, This is serious. We shouldn't be gossiping. We're not gossiping, Ethan protested. We're investigating. I raised an eyebrow. Investigating? And how exactly do you plan to do that? A mischievous grin spread across Ethan's face. Well, I may have overheard where Mrs. Holloway lives when I was in the office last week. No, I said firmly. Absolutely not. We can't just go snooping around her house. That's illegal. We wouldn't be going inside. Zoe chimed in, looking excited now. Just driving by, to see if we noticed anything suspicious. I wanted to argue further, but a part of me was curious and worried. Despite her tough exterior, Mrs. Holloway had written me a glowing college recommendation letter. She'd stayed after school countless times to help me with my essays. The thought of her in danger made my chest tighten. Fine, he sighed, but we're just driving by. Once. And then we're leaving it to the professionals. After school, we piled into Ethan's beat-up Corolla. As we drove through the quiet suburban streets, I felt like a character in one of those teen mystery novels Mrs. Holloway was always recommending. There it is, Ethan said, slowing down as we approached a modest two-story house with blue shutters. Mrs. Holloway's red Prius sat in the driveway, exactly where it shouldn't be on a school day. The sight sent a chill down my spine. Look, Zoe pointed, the newspaper's still on the porch, and those plants look like they need watering. She was right. Everything about the scene screamed that no one had been home for at least a day. Maybe we should call the police, I suggested, my voice shaking slightly. Tell them what we've seen. Ethan shook his head. And say what? That we drove by our missing teacher's house? They'll want to know why we're here. We could get in trouble. As we debated our next move, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A curtain in the upstairs window twitched, as if someone had quickly stepped away. Guys, I whispered, my heart pounding. I think I just saw someone in the house. Zoe's eyes widened. Mrs. Holloway. I don't know. It was too quick to tell. Ethan put the car in park. We have to check it out. Are you insane? I hissed. We can't just break into her house. We're not breaking in, he argued. We're performing a wellness check. If Mrs. Holloway is in there and needs help, we have to do something. Every instinct told me this was a bad idea, but the thought of Mrs. Holloway in danger overrode my better judgment. Fine, but if we hear or see anything suspicious, we're calling 911 immediately. We approached the house cautiously, our footsteps seeming impossibly loud on the quiet street. The front door was locked, but Ethan discovered a hidden key under a flower pot. Of course, Mrs. Holloway would hide a key, Zoe muttered. She probably has a whole lecture prepared on the importance of being prepared. As we stepped inside, the silence was oppressive. The house smelled of old coffee and lavender air freshener. Everything looked normal, almost eerily so. Mrs. Holloway, I called out, my voice shaky. It's Alex, from your English class. Are you here? No response. We moved through the house, checking each room. The kitchen was spotless, a half-empty mug of coffee sitting on the counter. The living room was tidy, a book face down on the armchair, as if its reader had just stepped away. As we climbed the stairs, the floorboards creaked ominously. My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure the others could hear it. Look, Zoe whispered, pointing to a door at the end of the hall. It was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness visible through the crack. We approached slowly, every horror movie I'd ever seen flashing through my mind. Ethan reached out, pushing the door open. The bedroom was dark, heavy curtains blocking out the afternoon sun. As our eyes adjusted, I saw a figure huddled in the corner. Mrs. Holloway, I gasped. The figure moved, and I heard a familiar voice, thick with tears. Alex, what are you doing here? Relief flooded through me, quickly followed by confusion. Mrs. Holloway looked terrible. Her usually immaculate hair was a mess, her clothes rumpled. Her eyes were red and puffy, her face pale. "We were worried about you," Zoe said softly. "You didn't come to school, and no one knew where you were." Mrs. Holloway let out a choked laugh. "I'm sorry. I couldn't face it. Not today." "Face what?" Ethan asked. She took a shuddering breath. Today is the anniversary of my daughter's death. 5 years ago. She would have been graduating this year." The room fell silent. I'd had no idea Mrs. Holloway had lost a child. Suddenly, her strict demeanor, her push for us to succeed, it all made sense. "I thought I could handle it," she continued. "I've managed every other year. But something about it being her graduation year, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't watch all of you move on, knowing she never will." I moved closer, kneeling beside her. "Mrs. Holloway, I'm so sorry. We had no idea." She wiped her eyes. "Of course you didn't. I've never told anyone at the school. It was easier to be the strict teacher than to be the grieving mother." "You should have told us," Zoe said gently. "We could have supported you." Mrs. Holloway smiled weakly. "You're sweet, but it's not your burden to bear. I just needed some time." "Well, you scared the hell out of everyone," Ethan said, his bluntness breaking the tension. "The whole school thinks you've been kidnapped or worse." Despite everything, Mrs. Holloway laughed. "Oh dear, I suppose I should call Mr. Grayson and explain." As she reached for her phone, I felt a wave of emotions wash over me. Relief that she was safe, sadness for her loss, and a new understanding of the woman who had pushed us so hard all year. "Mrs. Holloway," I said, "I know we're not your students anymore, technically, but if you need anything, even just someone to talk to, we're here." She looked at us, her eyes glistening. "Thank you. You know, my daughter would have loved you all. She had the same spirit, the same curiosity that led you here today." As we helped Mrs. Holloway clean up and prepare to face the world again, I realized that sometimes the most important lessons aren't found in textbooks. They're found in the quiet moments of human connection, in the shared experiences of loss and hope. And as we left Mrs. Holloway's house that day, I knew that while our high school journey was ending, a new chapter of understanding and compassion was just beginning. The first bite of my chicken sandwich tasted like freedom. The last day of school, the cafeteria buzzing with excitement, and a whole summer stretching out before us. I had no idea that in mere minutes, that taste of freedom would turn to ash in my mouth. I was sitting with my usual crew, Mia, Jaden, and Zoe, at our corner table. The cafeteria was louder than usual, everyone amped up on the promise of impending vacation. "I can't believe we're finally done," Mia said, picking at her salad. "No more pop quizzes, no more detentions, no more." "Mystery Meat Mondays," Jaden finished, grinning as he bit into his burger. I laughed, taking another bite of my sandwich. Speak for yourself. Some of us are enjoying our last school lunch. Zoe rolled her eyes. "Only you would actually miss cafeteria food, Liam." I was about to retort when a commotion near the lunch line caught my attention. A freshman girl was doubled over, clutching her stomach. At first, I thought she was laughing, but then I saw the pain etched on her face. "Hey, is she okay?" I asked, nodding towards a girl. Before anyone could answer, the girl collapsed. A hush fell over the cafeteria, followed by a burst of panicked voices. "Someone call the nurse." "What happened? Is she breathing?" I stood up, trying to get a better view. That's when I noticed it wasn't just the one girl. Several students were now hunched over their trays, faces contorted in pain. "Guys," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "I think something's wrong." Jaden opened his mouth to respond, but instead lurched forward, vomiting violently onto his tray. Mia screamed, jumping back to avoid the splatter. "Jay!" Zoe cried, reaching for him. But as she moved, she too doubled over, a groan escaping her lips. My heart raced as I looked around the cafeteria. It was chaos. Students were collapsing left and right. Others were running for the exits, and the air was filled with the sounds of retching and crying. "We need to get help," I said, grabbing Mia's arm. She nodded, her face pale with shock. As we made our way towards the exit, dodging panicked students and puddles of vomit, I saw Mr. Reeves, our vice principal, burst through the doors. "Everyone remain calm," he shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the cacophony of distress. "The paramedics are on their way. If you're feeling ill, please sit down and wait for assistance." I caught his eye and waved him over. "Mr. Reeves, what's happening?" He shook his head, his usually composed demeanor cracking. "We're not sure, Liam. It seems to be some kind of food poisoning, but it's happening so fast." A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't normal food poisoning. The speed, the number of people affected. It was something else entirely. "Liam." Mia tugged on my sleeve, her voice shaking. "I don't feel so good." I turned to her, watching in horror as the color drained from her face. She swayed on her feet, and I barely managed to catch her as she collapsed. "Mr. Reeves," I yelled. "I need help." But he was already dealing with other sick students. The cafeteria had turned into a war zone, with more casualties by the second. As I lowered Mia to the ground, cradling her head in my lap, a thought struck me. Why wasn't I sick? I'd eaten the same food as everyone else. The sound of sirens pierced through the chaos. Help was coming, but would it be enough? I stayed with Mia as paramedics flooded the cafeteria. They worked quickly, assessing students and loading the worst cases onto stretchers. I answered their questions mechanically, still trying to process what was happening. "You said you ate the food too?" one paramedic asked me, his brow furrowed. I nodded. "Yeah, the chicken sandwich, but I feel fine." He exchanged a look with his colleague. "We'll need to take you in for testing. This isn't adding up." As they loaded Mia onto a stretcher, I followed, my mind racing. What had happened to our last day celebration? How had it turned into this nightmare? At the hospital, it was more chaos. The emergency room was overflowing with students and staff from school. Doctors and nurses rushed back and forth, calling out orders and test results. I sat in a plastic chair, waiting for news about my friends, about anyone. A young doctor approached me, clipboard in hand. "Liam?" she asked. I nodded. "I'm Dr. Chun. We've run some tests, and it seems you're not showing any signs of the toxin affecting the others." "Toxin?" I repeated, my mouth dry. "You mean this wasn't an accident?" Dr. Chen's face was grim. "We're still investigating, but the symptoms and rapid onset suggest an intentional contamination of the food supply." My stomach churned. Someone had done this on purpose? To students? On the last day of school? "Your friends are stable," Dr. Chun continued, "but we're keeping them for observation. Do you remember anything unusual about the cafeteria today? Anything out of place?" I closed my eyes, trying to think. The excitement of the last day had overshadowed everything else. But then, a memory surfaced. "There was a new lunch lady," I said slowly. I'd never seen her before. She was serving the chicken. Dr. Chen's eyes widened. She scribbled something on her clipboard. "Thank you, Liam. This could be important. I'm going to send in a police officer to take your statement." As she hurried away, I slumped in my chair. A new lunch lady. How had I not thought that was strange? But then again, why would I have? It was the last day of school. Everything was a little off-kilter. The next few hours were a blur of police questions, worried parents flooding the waiting room, and snippets of overheard conversations from doctors and nurses. Words like target attack and unknown substance floated around, each one adding to the knot of anxiety in my chest. It was late evening when they finally allowed me to see my friends. Jaden and Zoe were in the same room, both looking pale and tired, but alive. Mia was next door, already sitting up and arguing with a nurse about using her phone. "You guys look like crap," I said, attempting a smile as I entered Jaden and Zoe's room. Jaden managed a weak laugh. "Feels worse than it looks, trust me." Zoe just shook her head. "I can't believe this happened. Who would do something like this?" I pulled up a chair between their beds. "The police are investigating. They think it was the new lunch lady, but they haven't found her yet." "New lunch lady?" Jaden frowned. "I didn't notice anyone new." "Me neither," said Zoe. I shrugged. "I only remember because she commented on how much food I was taking. Said something like, 'Big appetite for the last day, huh?'" Zoe's eyes widened. "Wait, Liam, what exactly did she say?" I thought back, trying to remember the exact words. Something like, "That's a lot of food for someone so skinny. Big appetite for the last day." "Oh my God," Zoe whispered. "Liam, you're allergic to soy." I blinked, confused. "Yeah, so?" "So," Jaden said, catching on, "the chicken is usually fried in soybean oil. You always get the grilled chicken instead." The realization hit me like a truck. I hadn't even thought about it. I always got the grilled chicken. It was such a habit that I didn't even have to ask anymore. The regular lunch ladies knew my order by heart. But the new lady didn't know, I said slowly. "She gave me the regular chicken by mistake." Zoe nodded. "And you didn't eat it because I was talking to you guys." I finished. I only had a bite or two before everything went crazy. The implications were staggering. If I hadn't been distracted, if I had eaten the whole sandwich, I might be lying in a hospital bed too. Or worse. "We need to tell the police," Jaden said, reaching for the call button. As we waited for the officers to arrive, I couldn't shake the feeling of how close we'd all come to something much worse. A simple allergy, a moment of distraction, had potentially saved my life and given us a crucial clue. The last day of school was supposed to be about endings and new beginnings. Instead, it had turned into a nightmare that was far from over. As I looked at my friends, pale but alive in their hospital beds, I realized that our real test was just beginning. The summer stretched out before us, but now it was filled with unanswered questions. Who was the mysterious lunch lady? Why target our school? And most chillingly, what if she tried again? One thing was certain. Our last day of school would be remembered not for its celebration, but for the day we learned that sometimes survival comes down to the smallest, most unexpected things, like a soy allergy and a moment of distraction. As the police entered the room, I took a deep breath. Our story was far from over, but at least we were alive to tell it. The tassel on my graduation cap swung like a pendulum, marking the seconds until my life would change forever. Or so I thought. Little did I know. The next hour would redefine my understanding of fear and test every instinct I possessed. The ceremony had been a blur of speeches, cheers, and the constant flashing of cameras. Now, as I made my way through the thinning crowd in the school parking lot, a mix of emotions swirled in my chest. Pride at what I'd accomplished, excitement for the future, and a touch of melancholy for the chapter of my life that was closing. "Mia, wait up." I turned to see my best friend Jade, weaving through the sea of blue gowns and beaming parents. Her cap was askew, and her mascara had left faint tracks down her cheeks from happy tears. "Can you believe it?" she squealed, throwing her arms around me. "We did it. We're officially high school graduates." I laughed, returning her hug. "I know. It feels surreal." As we separated, Jade's eyes widened. "Oh shoot, I forgot. My mom wants 1,000,000 more pictures. I swear, if she takes one more, my face is going to freeze in this smile." She rolled her eyes dramatically. "You heading out?" I nodded. "Yeah, my parents had to leave right after the ceremony. Dad's got an early flight tomorrow, so they wanted to beat traffic. I'm just going to head home and change before meeting you guys at Tyler's party." "Okay, don't be late, and be careful walking to your car. It's getting dark, and you know how creepy this parking lot gets at night. I waved off her concern. I'll be fine. It's not that far. See you in a bit. As Jade disappeared back into crowd, I turned toward the far end of the lot where I'd parked this morning. The sun had almost set, casting long shadows across the asphalt. The excited chatter of my classmates faded as I walked, replaced by the soft chirping of early evening crickets. I fished my keys out of my gown pocket. The little pepper spray keychain my dad had given me for my 16th birthday clinking against them. I'd always thought he was being overprotective, but now, in the growing darkness, I was grateful for it. The lot was nearly empty on this side, most people having parked closer to the school for the ceremony. My old Honda Civic sat alone under a flickering streetlight, a small island in a sea of empty spaces. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. At first, I thought nothing of it, probably just another student heading to their car. But as I listened, I realized something was off. The steps were too quick, too purposeful, and they were getting closer. My heart rate picked up. I quickened my pace, the click of my heels on the asphalt suddenly seeming too loud in the quiet evening air. The footsteps behind me sped up to match. Don't panic, I told myself. You're being paranoid. It's just another person walking to their car. But my instincts were screaming at me that something was wrong. I gripped my keys tighter, positioning the pepper spray between my fingers like my dad had shown me. I was about 20 yards from my car now. The footsteps were closer, much closer. I could hear the person's breathing, slightly labored, as if they'd been walking quickly for a while. Do not run. A voice in my head cautioned. Running makes you a target. Just get to the car. You're almost there. 15 yards. 10. The streetlight above my car flickered ominously. Suddenly, a shadow fell over me. Someone was right behind me. Adrenaline surged through my body. Without thinking, I spun around, finger on the trigger of the pepper spray. Whoa! Easy there, Mia. I blinked, my finger freezing millimeters from spraying. Standing before me, hands raised in surrender, was Mr. Jacobs, my calculus teacher. Mr. Jacobs? I gasped, lowering the pepper spray. What are you doing here? He chuckled, though I noticed his eyes darting to the spray still clutched in my hand. I saw you walking alone and thought I'd make sure you got to your car safely. Didn't mean to scare you. Relief flooded through me, quickly followed by embarrassment. Oh God, I'm so sorry. I heard footsteps and... Mr. Jacobs waved off my apology. No. I should be the one apologizing. I should have called out to you instead of just following. These days, you can't be too careful. I nodded, my heart rate slowly returning to normal. Yeah, I guess you're right. Thanks for checking on me. He smiled, but something about it seemed off. It didn't quite reach his eyes. Of course. Say, since I'm here, mind if I take a look at your car? I heard a strange noise coming from it earlier when I was walking by. A chill ran down my spine. You heard a noise from my car, but I haven't even started it yet. Mr. Jacob's smile faltered for a split second. Oh, I meant when you arrived this morning. I was on parking lot duty, remember? I didn't remember, and Mr. Jacobs hadn't been on parking lot duty this morning. I'd seen Mrs. Henderson directing traffic when I'd arrived. Right, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Well, I'm sure it's fine. I should really get going. Don't want to be late for the grad party. I turned toward my car, my hands shaking as I tried to find the right key. Mr. Jacob stepped closer. Come on, Mia. It'll only take a second. Pop the hood, and I'll take a quick look. Better safe than sorry, right? His voice had lost its friendly tone. There was an edge to it now, an impatience that made my skin crawl. Really, Mr. Jacobs, I'm fine. Thank you for your concern, but I need to go. I finally managed to get the key in the lock, but as I turned it, a hand slammed against the car door, keeping it shut. Mr. Jacobs loomed over me, his face inches from mine. I said, "Pop the hood, Mia." In that moment, I knew with certainty that this man was not my calculus teacher. The realization hit me like a bucket of ice water. How had I not seen it before? The slightly off haircut, the unfamiliar cologne, the way he stood just a little too close. Time seemed to slow down. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Every self-defense class my parents had forced me to take flashed through my mind. Without hesitation, I brought my knee up hard, connecting solidly with his groin. As he doubled over in pain, I spun around, finally pressing down on the pepper spray trigger. The imposter howled as the spray hit his eyes. I used the moment to wrench open my car door, throwing myself inside and slamming it shut. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. Come on," I muttered, glancing up to see the man stumbling towards my car, one hand over his eyes, the other outstretched. The engine roared to life. I threw the car into reverse, tires screeching as I backed out of the space. In my rear-view mirror, I saw the man fall to his knees, still clawing at his eyes. I sped out of the parking lot, my graduation gown billowing around me, the tassel from my forgotten cap swinging wildly from the rear-view mirror. As soon as I hit the main road, I fumbled for my phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. 911, what's your emergency? There's a man, I gasped, realizing I was crying. In the high school parking lot, he tried to attack me. He was pretending to be a teacher. The dispatcher's calm voice guided me through the next steps. Police were dispatched. I was told to drive to a well-lit, public place and wait. As I sat in a busy gas station parking lot, waiting for the police to arrive, the reality of what had just happened washed over me. The night that was supposed to mark the beginning of my adult life had nearly become something much darker. My phone buzzed. A text from Jade. "Where are you?" "Everyone's here." I stared at the message, unsure how to even begin explaining what had happened. How do you tell your friends that while they were celebrating, you were fighting for your life? The flash of police lights in my rearview mirror snapped me back to the present. As I stepped out of my car to talk to the officers, still wearing my graduation gown, I realized that I had just passed a test far more important than any I'd taken in school. I had trusted my instincts. I had fought back. I had survived. The tassel from my cap, still swinging from my rearview mirror, caught my eye. It was no longer just a symbol of academic achievement. Now, it was a reminder of the night I truly graduated. Not just from high school, but into a world where danger could wear a familiar face and where my own strength could surprise me. As I recounted my story to the officers, I made a silent promise to myself. This experience wouldn't define me, but it would inform me. I would carry this lesson with me, a secret diploma in survival, as I stepped into the future I had fought to keep. The detention slip felt like a death sentence in my hand. Last day of school, and here I was, trapped in the one place I'd been dreaming of escaping for months. But as the clock ticked away those final hours, I had no idea that this mundane punishment would turn into a nightmare that would haunt me long after the school year ended. I slumped into the hard plastic chair, the only occupant in the silent classroom. Mr. Peterson, the usual detention monitor, was nowhere to be seen. Instead, Mr. Reeves, the school custodian, stood at the front of the room, idly pushing a mop across the already clean floor. "Just you and me today, Jake," he said, his gravelly voice breaking the silence. "Guess everyone else was smart enough to behave on the last day, huh?" I mumbled something non-committal, pulling out my phone to check the time. 3 hours to go. 3 hours of staring at the wall, listening to the squeak of Mr. Reeves' mop on the linoleum floor. Mr. Reeves had always been a bit off, the kind of guy you'd cross the hallway to avoid if you saw him coming. There were rumors, of course, whispers about why he always wore long sleeves, even in the dead of summer. theories about the collection of locks on his cleaning cart. But they were just stories, right? The kind of urban legends every school has about the creepy staff member who never quite fits in. As the minutes crawled by, I found myself watching Mr. Reeves more closely. The way he moved seemed almost rehearsed, like he was putting on a show of cleaning rather than actually doing it. His eyes, when they occasionally flicked in my direction, held an intensity that made me shift uncomfortably in my seat. An hour in, Mr. Reeves wheeled his cleaning cart to the classroom door. The rattling of metal made me look up from the doodle I'd been absent-mindedly sketching in my notebook. Click. The sound of the lock sliding into place echoed in the quiet room. My heart rate picked up a notch. Mr. Reeves, why are you locking the door? He turned to face me, a smile spreading across his face that didn't quite reach his eyes. Just following protocol, Jake. Can't have you wandering off now, can we? I nodded slowly, trying to ignore the unease growing in the pit of my stomach. It's fine, I told myself. He's just doing his job. But as I watched him return to his cart, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. Mr. Reeves began to hum softly, an eerie tune that seemed to fill the room. As he organized the contents of his cart, I caught glimpses of things that didn't belong in a standard cleaning kit. Was that a coil of rope? A roll of duct tape? My palms began to sweat. I wiped them on my jeans, trying to calm my racing thoughts. You're overreacting, I chided myself. It's just cleaning supplies. But the little voice in the back of my head, the one that had always told me Mr. Reeves was someone to avoid, was screaming now. You know, Jake, Mr. Reeves said suddenly, making me jump. I've been watching you. All year, in fact. You're different from the others. Smarter. More aware. I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. Thanks, I guess. He turned to face me fully, leaning against his cart. Do you know why I became a custodian, Jake? I shook my head, not trusting my voice to remain steady. It's the perfect job for observing, for learning, for selecting. The way he said selecting sent a chill down my spine. I glanced at the locked door, then back to Mr. Reeves. He was still smiling that unsettling smile. I don't understand. I managed to croak out. Mr. Reeves chuckled, a low, menacing sound. Of course you don't. Not yet, but you will. You see, Jake, I've been looking for someone special, someone who can appreciate my work. He rolled up his sleeve slowly, revealing a forearm covered in intricate scars. Patterns and symbols I didn't recognize crisscrossed his skin. Beautiful, aren't they? He whispered, tracing one of the scars with his finger. Each one tells a story, a lesson learned, a soul collected. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not now. Not on the last day of school when everyone else was celebrating their freedom. I stood up abruptly, my chair screeching against the floor. I need to use the bathroom. Mr. Reeves' smile widened. No need to pretend, Jake. I can see the fear in your eyes. It's exhilarating, isn't it? The moment you realize you're not at the top of the food chain anymore. He took a step towards me, and I stumbled backward, knocking over my chair. My mind raced, searching for a way out. The windows were too high. The door was locked. I was trapped. Please, I said, hating how weak my voice sounded. Just let me go. I won't tell anyone, I swear. Mr. Reeves laughed, a sound that made my blood run cold. Oh, Jake, you're not going anywhere. We have so much to discuss, so much for you to learn. He reached into his cart, pulling out a wicked-looking knife. The blade gleamed in the fluorescent lighting of the classroom. Now, he said, his voice taking on an almost teacherly tone. Shall we begin our lesson? In that moment, survival instinct kicked in. I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy textbook, and hurled it at Mr. Reeves' head. He ducked, but the distraction was enough. I bolted for the door, fumbling with the lock. "You can't escape, Jake." "Mr. Reeves called out, his voice filled with a twisted glee. "We're just getting started." My fingers finally found purchase on the lock. Twisting it open, I yanked the door open and ran into the hallway, my footsteps echoing off the empty lockers. Behind me, I could hear Mr. Reeves in pursuit, his cart rattling as he gave chase. The school felt like a maze, corridors stretching endlessly before me. Every turn looked the same, every classroom door a potential dead end. My lungs burned as I ran. Fueled by pure adrenaline, I skidded around a corner, nearly losing my footing on the freshly waxed floor. There, the exit sign glowed like a beacon of hope. I sprinted towards it, Mr. Reeves, heavy breathing growing closer by the second. Just as my hand touched the push bar of the exit door, I felt a sharp pain in my calf. I cried out, stumbling forward through the door into the bright afternoon sunlight. Looking down, I saw a small knife protruding from my leg, a parting gift from Mr. Reeves. The pain was intense, but the fear of what lay behind me was stronger. I limped as fast as I could across the parking lot, praying that anyone, would be around to help. "Jake," Mr. Reeves' voice rang out from the school entrance. "This isn't over. You can't escape what's inside you." I didn't look back. I couldn't. I just kept moving, each step sending waves of pain through my leg. Finally, I saw a group of students gathered near the football field, probably getting ready for some end-of-year celebration. "Help!" I screamed, my voice hoarse and desperate. "Please help me." The students turned, their expressions changing from confusion to shock as they saw my bleeding leg and the terror on my face. One of them pulled out a phone, presumably calling 911. As I collapsed onto the grass, the adrenaline finally wearing off, I heard sirens in the distance. I closed my eyes, relief washing over me. I was safe. I had escaped, but even as the paramedics arrived and the police swarmed the school, looking for Mr. Reeves, I knew that a part of me would always be back in that classroom. The part that learned, in those terrifying moments, that sometimes the monsters we fear are all too real, hiding behind mundane jobs and friendly smiles. The last day of school was supposed to be a celebration of endings and new beginnings. Instead, it became the day I lost my innocence, the day I learned that evil can wear a familiar face and carry a mop. As I was loaded into the ambulance, I caught a glimpse of the school building. For a moment, I thought I saw a figure watching from one of the upper windows. But when I blinked, it was gone. The paramedic asked me questions, but I barely heard them. My mind was still in that classroom, still trying to process what had happened. The detention slip that had felt like a death sentence now seemed like a cruel joke. I had survived, yes, but at what cost? The last day of school had taught me a lesson no classroom ever could. That the world is full of dangers we can't always see coming, and that sometimes the most important skill is knowing when to run. As the ambulance doors closed and we pulled away from the school, I made a silent vow. I would heal, I would move on, but I would never forget. And I would never again ignore that little voice telling me something wasn't right. The school faded from view, but the memory of Mr. Reeves' smile, his scars, and his chilling words would stay with me forever. The last day of school had ended, but a new, more terrifying chapter of my life had just begun.